The search of the impact area in the Atlantic has yielded more than 1,600 pounds of wreckage from the stricken shuttle Challenger, and the crisscrossing of the ocean area resumed at first light this morning. Nozzles that may have come from the solid boosters are said to have been located, and consideration is given to diving for what may be on the bottom.
This is Daybreak on CNN for Thursday, January 30th. With Reed Collins in Washington and Molly McCoy and Patrick Greenlaw in Atlanta.
Good morning. More than 1,600 pounds of wreckage has now been plucked from the Atlantic, downrange from the Kennedy Space Center, and the search for more debris continues this morning. Larry Lamont is standing by live at the Kennedy Space Center. Larry, has anything significant been recovered now?
We still don't know for sure. They are saying basically that small items have been recovered, such as tubing and electronic pieces, but also a couple of large cone-shaped objects. No one is saying for sure what they are, though it is believed to be off of one of the Challenger's solid rocket boosters. Those cone-shaped objects were spotted last night. They're still out there as they're attempting to remove them from the ocean. So far, they haven't. There's also been reports that pieces of the Challenger have been found with the name Challenger on them. But the Coast Guard isn't verifying those reports. They say they are only rumors. And another report that a woman found a charred glove along the shore. NASA not responding to that at all. And in fact, they are saying that no clothing has been found at this point. So there are a lot of rumors floating around here. One thing I might say is that a lot of people feel that a part of America died when the Challenger exploded. And in that gloom, there is an increased determination on the part of NASA to find the cause of the explosion. It has intensified the search, which has now been expanded to an 8,000 square mile area. 13 ships and 13 planes are out there looking. The ships are now using their sonar. They started doing that last night for the first time, listening for any pings that might indicate that some of the debris is on the ocean bottom. The ocean bottom in much of the search area is only 200 feet deep, so it is very likely that if it's there, it'll be heard. As to the divers, they'll determine what to do once they begin hearing sounds on the ocean bottom. No determination yet about those divers. So it's very active out here today as it was yesterday. A lot of determination trying to get to the bottom of this tragedy. Indeed, a tragedy for America. Larry Lamont, CNN, the Kennedy Space Center.
Some potential evidence into the disaster may have been destroyed unnecessarily seconds after the spaceship exploded. NASA, watching the horror unfolding from the ground, and noticed the two rocket boosters, the solids, straying away from the initial explosion. And one of those rockets, NASA said, seemed to be veering toward a populated area back on land. Officials, the Air Force Range Safety Officer, ordered the solid rocket boosters destroyed, and moments later, via radio control, the two rockets were exploded. Further tragedy averted. Now, those boosters, however, may have provided some clue, as to whether the rockets somehow were linked to the fateful explosion. This, of course, has been a difficult time at the Johnson Space Center, particularly near Houston. Mission control for the Challenger and the other space shuttle launches. Employees there are shocked and upset. CNN's Tony Clark is there. And Tony, what is the mood down there this morning?
You know, Reed, when the shuttle astronauts communicate with Mission Control, they always refer to it as Houston, the large city of Houston. But the Space Center is really not in Houston, but the bedroom community of Clear Lake. It is a small town where everyone knows someone in the space business, and the sorrow over the loss of the astronauts is a community sorrow. They came from all over the area, some from NASA, some just neighbors, drawn into a kinship through tragedy. They filled the Catholic church down the road from astronaut Dick Scobee's house. They came to be together, to draw comfort and strength from each other. Father Tom Butler said it's hard to understand a tragedy like this, but nothing can wipe away the love this community felt for the astronauts and their families.
We are here tonight because our lives were in some way, touched their lives. And that's very important to us.
There were hugs and tears and prayers shared as the congregation remembered their lost colleagues, but they were reminded that this week's tragedy is not the end.
I know that we will walk through this hour to live and to love and to fly again. We will. I know we will.
They seem to draw strength from each other, to help each other during this time of sadness. Just the sort of teamwork, Father Butler said, that the astronauts would appreciate. There are more memorial services planned for today and tomorrow to deal with the pain. Meanwhile, the focus of attention here is on the cause of the crash. All of the initial data seem to indicate that everything was normal prior to the explosion of the shuttle. The computer information has been impounded, written statements have been taken from everyone inside the mission control, and the failure analysis team is poring over the information, searching for anything that may be a clue as to what happened and caused the loss of the lives of the 7 astronauts. Molly?
Thank you. That was Tony Clark reporting live from the Johnson Space Center this morning. It is 6 minutes past the hour now. Throughout the country, in churches and in classrooms, Americans have pulled together to share comfort. CNN's Don Lennox has this report on how Americans are helping each other with their grief over the shuttle disaster.
As the shock of the space shuttle tragedy truly began to sink in, much of America sought solace in religion. In New York, memorial services were led by Cardinal O'Connor.
This is magnificent. This is a great outpouring of love, an effort to express that love in some way. It is dominantly, I think, the solidarity of suffering.
In Christa McAuliffe's hometown of Concord, New Hampshire, a special commemoration. Many of her students and friends were there. The priest tried to comfort the children who had watched the disaster replayed on television over and over again.
Your mother or father said to you, it's time for you to get rid of that blanket or that animal. How many of you had something like that? Do you remember what you felt like that very first time that you didn't have to sleep with it? How did it feel? It felt bad. Did you feel something awful inside? Do you know that those are probably the same kinds of feelings that you're feeling over this tragedy that we had?
They also mourned in Titusville, Florida, near the Kennedy Space Center. And at services in Houston. But perhaps it is the nation's school children who have lost the most. It was a source of great pride that Christa McAuliffe, the first ordinary citizen chosen for space, was a teacher. Before their very eyes, that pride and joy turned to horror. And now they're trying to cope with their grief.
When I saw the shuttle blow up, it really happened. It wasn't just make-believe or anything. People really died.
When people get blown up in a spaceship, how come it seems like that everything falls apart?
But Christa McAuliffe reached for the stars, and many of the kids say the dream must live on in the space program.
Now with this, I really, really want to be an astronaut because I want to continue that dream.
While the children were philosophical, the nation's business leaders were respectful. A moment of silence at the stock exchanges. Flags at half-mast on Wall Street and on government buildings across the country. Drivers turned on their headlights in remembrance. Banner headlines from coast to coast. One Memphis newspaper put out a special edition. It hasn't done that since President Kennedy was assassinated.
Extra, extra!
At a ceremony in the National Air and Space Museum, Florida Congressman Bill Nelson said the Challenger crew knew the risks they took.
They understood the lesson that Helen Keller had taught us years ago, that life is either a daring adventure or nothing.
Don Lennox, CNN.
A new poll shows Americans still back the shuttle program despite their shock and grief over the Challenger disaster. ABC News talked to 500 people. 79% of them support the shuttle program, 16% oppose it, 5% say they have no opinion. The death of school teacher Christa McAuliffe, a board challenger, has not dampened support for including civilians on future shuttle flights. 72% want to continue that practice, 22% say no, 5% have no opinion. The ABC poll, by the way, has a 5% margin of error.
President Reagan goes to Houston tomorrow, where there will be a memorial service for the Shuttle Challenger astronauts. White House advance teams are at the Johnson Space Center in Houston making preparations. Yesterday, Mr. Reagan spent an hour telephoning families of the dead astronauts. An aide said it was tough.
It's half past the hour now, and in the news headlines this morning, some bits and pieces of the Shuttle Challenger, some 1,600 pounds of material, has already been recovered by the search teams combing the Atlantic for debris of what was the shuttle. More wreckage, including 2 cone-shaped objects, is to be picked up today. Also today, ships employing sonar will start a search and scan of the ocean's bottom, where several large pieces of debris are believed to have been located. All of this material NASA's hoping may provide some clue into the Challenger tragedy. Across the nation, Americans continue mourning the loss of Challenger's 7-member crew. Yesterday, here in Washington, a plaque that bears the names and pictures of the lost shuttle crew was placed in tribute at the Air and Space Museum. Hundreds of onlookers joined some lawmakers at this Challenger memorial. The nation mourns the worst disaster in space history, the loss of the 7 Americans aboard the Shuttle Challenger, as debris and possibly clues to this tragedy are being gathered off the Florida coast. Good morning, I'm Reed Collins, and what may be some clue to the Challenger disaster reportedly has been found in the Atlantic Ocean off Florida. CNN has learned that the Coast Guard has located what is believed to be a large section of one of the Challenger's control panels. In Florida now, we have CNN's Larry Lamont standing by at the Kennedy Space Center. Larry, what have they found, and do we know?
Well, they have found a couple of items, and there's some dispute now as to exactly what they are. We were told by a Coast Guard person on shore at the ocean that this appeared to be a control panel. We have with us now Lieutenant Commander Jim Simpson, and what is your view of what was found today?
They have found several pieces of panel that have wiring and have gauges. I think for us to make the conclusion that this is a control panel, that's not our job. That's for NASA to look at it, and they'll tell us what it is.
So are you upset that one of your personnel made that conclusion?
No, I mean, they're describing it as best they can, and that was their descriptive use, but I don't think you should take that as any confirming evidence of what this is. NASA knows what the shuttle is, not the Coast Guard.
It appears that more and more debris is being collected all the time, and it also appears that you have expanded your search area. Is all that true?
Yes. The search area today is 8,000 square miles versus 5,500 yesterday, and they are finding both more debris and larger pieces of debris.
Now, it was explained earlier today that one ship has on board an estimated 1,000 pounds of debris. Could you explain why that debris is not yet back on shore?
Sure. Each of the ships has been tasked with a search area and search patterns to run. They're not going to break them off just because they have some debris on board. As ships need to be refueled, or if they get so much debris that they can't fit anymore, those kinds of things will dictate when they bring debris in.
With you here, I can ask the question because I really didn't know for sure. It was reported yesterday that 2 cone-shaped objects had been discovered, and they had to send the bigger ships out to get them. What has happened with those objects?
The Coast Guard cutter Sweet Gum arrived there last night, took a look at them, and decided that they did not want to try and lift them up in darkness. The last report I had is that as soon as they got daylight, they were going to try and recover them. I have not heard whether they've done that or not.
Now, we have a question coming in from Reed Collins. Reed?
Well, I'd like to ask you if it is generally conceded that those large cones are the nose cones from the solid boosters that were destroyed on purpose by the range safety officer shortly after the disaster Tuesday morning. Isn't that what we're talking about out there?
I think I know what your answer is going to be, but Reed wants to know out of Washington whether those cone-like objects came from the boosters that were destroyed after the explosion.
Yeah, I have no idea. I mean, when they get recovered and brought into shore, NASA will look at them and they'll decide what they are. Understand that the Coast Guard and Navy people out there are not shuttle experts. They're recovering debris. They bring it in and turn it over to NASA. They'll tell us what it is. Our guys are just making general descriptions of it looks like this is the various size and shape. But they're not experts on what this material is.
You have 13 ships out there, 13 airplanes, including helicopters. Has there been any difficulty coordinating all that activity?
Sure. That is a massive search to coordinate. The Coast Guard cutter Dallas is the on-scene commander, so they have to keep track of each of those units. That's one of the reasons why we're not getting fed back to us information like what color this particular piece is or how long it is, because the Dallas is tied up with the operational communications of keeping all those ships and aircraft in the right area without running into each other. They just don't have time to pass back the little details of what things look like. They're just not concerned with that kind of information, as important as it is to you people.
Everyone has been asking about the use of divers. What are the plans?
They are searching with sonar from the Navy ships and the cutter Dallas. They also have some helicopters tasked today to go look at specific splashdown points that NASA has provided to see if they can see anything under the water. If they locate anything that way, then they'll go to the next step of do we get divers or how do we go about recovering it. So far, they have not located anything that way.
How long do you think the search along the ocean for debris will last?
I have no idea. At the end of each day's search, the planning people in Miami will make a determination as to whether to go again tomorrow and then make plans throughout the night as to what units will be involved.
And finally, on the first day of the search, it appeared that smaller objects were being found. Does it appear that we're now finding much larger objects?
Yes, that's correct.
All right. Lieutenant Commander Simpson of the Coast Guard, and they are trying to say that they are simply collecting debris from the ocean. They're not going to identify what it is. That is up to NASA. NASA, by the way, just a few minutes ago told us the same thing. When we asked, well, what is the significance of what appears to be a control panel? They said, well, we're going to leave that up to the review board to determine. We have no comment on that subject. But obviously, if that is the control panel found out there last night, it would certainly indicate that the shuttle was blown apart. And if anyone had any hope at all for the astronauts on board, that would be the nail in the coffin. I'm Larry Lamott, CNN, at the Kennedy Space Center.
Well, of course, the mourning and the memorials for the shuttle crew members does continue, as does that search for clues into their deaths out in the water. In Palm Bay, Florida, for example, officials have decided that they'll name a new school, one still under construction, in honor of the teacher, Christa McAuliffe. CNN's Don Lennox reports on the many, many tributes.
As the shock of the space shuttle tragedy truly began to sink in, much of America sought solace in religion. In New York, memorial services were led by Cardinal O'Connor.
This is magnificent. This is a great outpouring of love, an effort to express that love in some way. But it's dominantly, I think, the solidarity of suffering.
In Christa McAuliffe's hometown of Concord, New Hampshire, a special commemoration. Many of her students and friends were there. The priest tried to comfort the children who had watched the disaster replayed on television over and over again.
Your mother or father said to you, it's time for you to get rid of that blanket or that animal. How many of you had something like that? Do you remember what you felt like that very first time that you didn't have to sleep with it? How did it feel? It felt bad. Did you feel something awful inside? Do you know that those are probably the same kinds of feelings that you're feeling over this tragedy that we had?
They also mourned in Titusville, Florida, near the Kennedy Space Center. And at services in Houston. But perhaps it is the nation's school children who have lost the most. It was a source of great pride that Christa McAuliffe, the first ordinary citizen chosen for space, was a teacher. Before their very eyes, that pride and joy turned to horror. And now they're trying to cope with their grief.
When I saw the shuttle blow up, I it really happened. It wasn't just make-believe or anything. People really died.
When people get blown up in spaceship, how come it seems like that everything falls apart?
But Christa McAuliffe reached for the stars, and many of the kids say the dream must live on in the space program.
Now with this, I really, really want to be an astronaut because I want to continue that dream.
While the children were philosophical, the nation's business leaders were respectful. A moment of silence at the stock exchanges. Flags at half-mast on Wall Street and on government buildings across the country. Drivers turned on their headlights in remembrance. Banner headlines from coast to coast. One Memphis newspaper put out a special edition. It hasn't done that since President Kennedy was assassinated.
Extra, extra!
At a ceremony in the National Air and Space Museum, Florida Congressman Bill Nelson said the Challenger crew knew the risks they took.
They understood the lesson that Helen Keller had taught us years ago, that life is either a daring adventure or nothing.
Don Lennox, CNN.
It is a special message the students of Christa McAuliffe's high school will hear tomorrow. It comes from the President of the United States. The White House says Mr. Reagan yesterday sent a letter to the students of Concord High School in New Hampshire. Its contents have not been revealed, but it is expected the words will be similar to what the President has told a nation stunned by the Challenger tragedy. Life has to go on, and so does the space program.
Reach for the Stars was the message handwritten by Christa McAuliffe to a class of 8th graders. The students at Mabel B. Avery School in Somers, Connecticut received the letter Wednesday, one day after McAuliffe and 6 other astronauts perished aboard the Challenger. The letter dated January 20th thanked the students for an earlier letter they wrote to her naming McAuliffe an honorary teacher at their school. NASA spokesmen in Florida and Texas say they have no idea how many other letters McAuliffe received from students around the country or had answered personally.
A Florida congressman has suggested a special tribute to the Challenger crew. Democrat Bill Nelson says 7 newly discovered moons of the planet Uranus should be named after the 7 dead astronauts. The moons were discovered recently by the unmanned U.S. space probe Voyager 2. Nelson, who flew on a shuttle mission himself, plans to introduce the proposal in Congress. He says it's one way to keep alive the memory of the 7 brave astronauts. A Washington institution with a rich collection of artifacts from the history of air and space travel has paid special tribute to the crew of Challenger. CNN's Mark Walton has this report.
At the Smithsonian's Air and Space Museum, they hung a special memorial plaque on the Space Shuttle exhibit.
In this building, dedicated to the signal moments in the history of flight, the memories of Dick Scobee and Michael Smith, Judith Resnik, Ronald McNair, Ellison, Onizuka, Gregory Jarvis, and Christa McAuliffe will live forever.
But you should be proud of Christa McAuliffe, one of your teachers, and of the other brave Americans who were willing to take great risks for the good of our country.
Earlier in the day, the museum had launched a fundraising drive to preserve irreplaceable newsreels of early aviation history. It was a reminder that from the start, man's steps toward space have been filled with danger and sacrifice.
Going down through mythology, you go down through the tower jumpers, the people who were drawn to flight and made crude wings and leapt off towers, they sacrificed themselves.
If you look at the early footage of space flight, we were talking this morning, virtually everybody who pioneered it was killed in a plane crash. But that didn't stop the movement ahead with respect to air flight and its development.
No, and the Challenger disaster hasn't stopped the hundreds of American school children from coming here. From coming to squeal in delight and gaze in amazement at the spaceships on display, as the sign on the shuttle souvenir shop reads, "The dream is alive."
We saw it on TV yesterday, and we sit down and try to explain to them exactly, what had happened, so they could get some understanding of it. And we even showed them the model downstairs, similar to the one that took off yesterday that exploded.
And still,
I wanted to get in there.
You wanted to get in there?
Mm-hmm.
And do what?
Fly it.
Does it make you change the way you feel about space?
No, it makes me even more, It makes, because I think that if we stop now, it'll go against, Christa McAuliffe and all the other astronauts that went up, because they're pursuing something too.
They understood the lesson that Helen Keller had taught us years ago, that life is either a daring adventure or nothing.
Mark Walton, CNN, Washington.
How America's school children are trying to cope with the death of the shuttle crew. Help was available in special classes yesterday throughout the nation. Psychologists urge teachers to talk openly with students about the disaster. They are worried the youngsters will experience exaggerated fears and nightmares. Experts say some might feel anxiety over the safety of their own teachers and parents. Most students were shaken up.
I just couldn't believe it. Thing like that, you know, it's never happened before. Not that bad anyway, not with 7 people. I had a big lump in my throat.
I was shocked. I was really touched, and something just went through me.
NASA has joined health experts in their concerns and is drawing up plans to bring psychological support to the nation's school children. Meantime, in Concord, New Hampshire, hometown of teacher astronaut Christa McAuliffe, her spirit and bravery are being honored in memorial services. This morning, her hometown paper called her the city's shining example. Some classes will resume today at the school where McAuliffe taught, while teachers and counselors try to comfort each other and students who witnessed Tuesday's terrible explosion. One counselor said Concord's grief has spread far beyond the school and the town to encircle the families of the other astronauts who lost their lives.
I think about the whole space program. I think about the other 6 people who were involved as well. Although Christa was very close to me and to the school, it hit us very hard. But I think about the other 6 members. I think about the 12 kids who lost a parent. I think about the whole nation.
The governor of New Hampshire is asking that church leaders set aside special services this weekend so that people can share their anguish in prayer.
And there will be a memorial for the Challenger astronauts at the Johnson Space Center in Houston tomorrow. President and Mrs. Reagan will attend. CNN's Tony Clark is standing by live in Houston now with the latest. Tony?
Everyone here is awaiting word on any new findings of debris found off the coast of Florida. They want very much to learn what caused the shuttle Challenger to explode, killing 7 of their colleagues. And as you say, while they wait, they console each other. Last night, several area churches turned their prayer meetings into memorials for the shuttle crew. At St. Bernadette's Catholic Church, the astronauts were hailed as heroes. Last night, more than 1,000 people crowded into a Catholic church north of the Space Center for a memorial mass. There were hugs and tears and prayers as this community tries to comfort itself. And to, as Father Tom Butler put it, learn to fly again. None of the astronauts killed belonged to St. Bernadette's, but that didn't matter. As CNN's Jeff Flock reports, this is a city that lives and breathes the space program.
It's known as Space City, the towns and communities that have grown up around the Johnson Space Center. It's estimated that 75 to 80% of the people who live here have some connection to the space program. Challenger pilot Mike Smith lived here. The company that built Challenger and other companies that built other shuttle equipment are here. The dead astronauts' friends and co-workers are here. To them, the first impact of the disaster was emotional.
Great tragedy, and it's like we've all lost a friend, a family member.
But in communities so closely tied to the space program, will there be an even greater economic impact if that program is de-emphasized?
NASA is why everybody's here.
Dave Ross, who runs the Chamber of Commerce in Clear Lake, Texas, surrounding the Johnson Space Center, admits that NASA is how everyone pays the bills here.
There probably wouldn't be nearly the community here that's here today because this community was developed around NASA.
The Space Center employs about 3,000 people. The contractors who build shuttles and other equipment employ another 6,000. The business their paychecks generate provide jobs for many others. Although NASA makes it clear it does not know what the future holds regarding a resumption of the shuttle program, there is concern here that it will be a while. Still, they are heartened by statements made by some government officials about the future of the space program.
We certainly intend to go forward with the program. There will be future launches. There will be future activities.
Despite the official pronouncements about confidence in the space program, The fact remains that the last time there was a disaster even approaching this magnitude, when 3 astronauts lost their lives in Apollo 1, it took nearly 2 years before there was another launch. There is the fear here now that we may be in for another long delay. I'm Jeff Flock, CNN, at the Johnson Space Center in Houston.
People here at the Johnson Space Center have taken this tragedy very personally. As you have heard, there will be a memorial service here at the Johnson Space Center attended by President and Mrs. Reagan tomorrow. It will be a private service for NASA employees only. Molly?
Thank you very much. Tony Clark reporting live from Houston. As we told you earlier, opinions are divided on the future of the U.S. space program. In Rome, Anthony Collins talked with some Italians and one Italian who hopes to be on a future shuttle flight.
Italian television broke into programming several times with the Challenger story. People were divided on what it meant for the future of space exploration.
Well, I feel bad. Well, but I think that they should go on just the same, those experiments.
We have to think about if it's useful to waste a lot of money and just to have this kind of danger for human life.
Italian astronaut Andrea Lorenzoni is a candidate to fly aboard a shuttle in 1988 for a joint U.S.-Italian project. Is he now worried about his own safety?
Absolutely not. This is just an accident. I don't know when the next accident will happen, but cannot happen in the next 10 years again. It's impossible.
Lorenzoni said he had known America's Judy Resnik, one of the victims of Challenger. She had worked with him preparing the U.S.-Italian project to launch a tethered satellite. He found it hard to believe she was now dead.
I think that if I go now in the office and try to phone her, she can answer to me, because it's unbelievable that she is not now within us.
Anthony Collins, CNN, Rome.
For the Challenger astronauts.
Christa McAuliffe's husband, Stephen, made his first public statement today since the tragic disaster, thanking the country for its condolences, saying, "We have all lost Christa."
Welcome to Newsday. I'm Bella Shaw.
And I'm Don Miller. Christa McAuliffe's center, and he has this update.
Residents here are as frustrated as the rest of the country and wanting to know what happened to the Space Shuttle Challenger. But here, they're not just sitting back and watching history. Because they live so near to the Kennedy Space Center and have followed this space program so closely, they now want to become part of history. They walk quietly along the beaches near Cape Canaveral, heads bowed towards the sand. In their own way, they're trying to help NASA find out what caused Challenger's fiery explosion. Many of these beachcombers have relatives who work at NASA. They feel a very personal loss. Most haven't found anything, but some, like Titusville's Doug Giffen, have been able to provide valuable clues to NASA in the form of space shuttle debris washed in by the morning tide. Most of the shuttle wreckage being found appears to be small pieces of foam-like insulation easily carried into shore. Doug Giffen found a piece about 4 inches wide and 6 inches long. It was badly charred by the fireball that engulfed Challenger shortly after it was launched. Giffen's family works at the Kennedy Space Center. His father is a shuttle engineer. He wasn't planning to search for wreckage, but found himself near Cocoa Beach with nothing to do. So he decided to join the small army of civilian volunteers who've assembled on nearby beaches with their head lowered to the sand, searching for clues.
Figured I better turn it in. It might be part of the shuttle since my dad works out there and my brother-in-law works out there, so it feels like it's only right.
Why'd you come out today?
Well, I didn't really plan on coming out. A friend of mine had to go to the dentist. I rode down with him from Titusville, so I decided to take a walk on the beach, look for some debris or something.
What'd you think when you found that one little piece?
I was just trying to figure out what it could be and some kind, where it came from, if it was from the shuttle.
You gonna keep looking?
Yeah. Till time for us to leave, and I'll probably come back the next couple days.
NASA's been concerned about pieces of wreckage being taken home as souvenirs. They very badly want all debris, no matter how small, turned over to local police to be forwarded to shuttle engineers. It was earlier feared the blast that engulfed the shuttle would leave few large clues. But the small armada of military ships and aircraft that are searching for wreckage are now finding larger pieces of the shuttle. These will be invaluable for engineers to try and learn what went wrong. while NASA continues its official search off the waters of Cape Canaveral. The volunteer work along the beaches of Florida's Space Coast is in full swing, powered by private citizens who just want to help however they can find the answer to the agonizing question of what went wrong with the shuttle that led to the deaths of 7 American astronauts. And just like the official search effort is expected to continue for the next several days, I'm told by a lot of the volunteer beachcombers that for the next several days also, they're going to be out on the beaches trying to find whatever small clues may be available. Don?
Al, just one question before you go. You mentioned souvenir hunters. Is there any precautions being taken to prevent souvenir hunters from taking away valuable pieces of the craft that might have floated on shore?
Well, Don, first, NASA is very concerned about the safety of people picking up any kind of little bits and remnants of the shuttle. Some of the parts of the shuttle that are out in the Atlantic now are dangerous, especially a lot of the fuel lines and any fuel tanks. Most of the stuff that's washing up on the beach, fortunately, though, is little bits of foam and other debris that is not dangerous. However, police are combing the beaches with a lot of the other people, and the police are there picking up much of the debris as soon as people get them off the beach because the police want to get them to NASA. I'm Al Sunshine reporting live from the Kennedy Space Center.
NASA has begun its exhaustive investigation into the Challenger disaster. At the Johnson Space Center in Houston today, flight controllers are reviewing all the data radioed back from the space shuttle. Computer banks hold an immense body of facts and figures about Challenger from the time it left the launching pad till its explosion in midair 74 seconds later. All notes taken by flight controllers have also been impounded for investigation.
The Challenger tragedy affects more than just the space program. It's also a setback for the Pentagon's defense plans. Bernard Shaw has more on that now from Washington.
The Pentagon has reserved the shuttle cargo bay for 4 missions this year. Challenger was supposed to carry a secret payload into space in December. A senior Pentagon official says bumping a commercial payload is an option, but no decisions have been made.
The Soviet press says the Challenger explosion was a serious warning against Stalin.
Memorial service for Challenger's crew. President and Mrs. Reagan plan to attend the service at the Johnson Space Center. The president already has preparations for the service.
Yes, Bella, I'm coming to you from inside Building 9A here at the Johnson Space Center in Houston. This is where a lot of the shuttle training takes place. Behind me, you can see a mock-up of one of the shuttles that's used for training. Outside the Johnson Space Center, however, the spruce-up is on. The preparations are underway, as you say, for the President's visit and Mrs. Reagan tomorrow. The President and Mrs. Reagan expected to be here at the Johnson Space Center tomorrow at about noon local time. Today they have been moving some trees that have been in the way of where the ceremonies are going to take place. They've been washing windows. They've been mowing the lawn. They're planting bushes. We saw a blackboard earlier here in this building today, and was the things to do for the day, and one was clean up for the President's visit tomorrow. Also, however, here, as you pointed out, the testing or the analysis of the test or of the data that they've gathered here from the flight continues at the Johnson Space Center as well. We should also mention that at that memorial service tomorrow, in addition to all the other preparations that are being made, there are other preparations in a nearby community being made for something very curious, or perhaps it's not so curious. Something has happened. People from all over the world, we are finding out, I've been sending flowers here to the Johnson Space Center and to the families of the 7 dead astronauts. The flowers have come in from all over the country and all around the world. We came not too long ago from a local flower shop that's been just inundated with requests for bouquets to be sent. They're all being made up, many of them being made up by this one flower shop, and they've put on extra staff to handle the great demand. Those flowers will be brought here to the Johnson Space Center tomorrow. Some later today. They'll be set out on the lawn here as part of the memorial service ceremony that's going to take place. And of course, CNN will be providing live coverage of that memorial service to begin about noon local time tomorrow. For now, I'm Jeff Flock, CNN, reporting live at the Johnson Space Center in Houston.